Hey y'all, Pastor Emil here with another episode of Sweet Jesus, trying to do something a little bit different today. Got the Facebook Live feed going while I am in the podcast studio trying to record here as well, just to see if we can get some more folks tuning in and get a chance to see what's going on. I know not everybody uses podcasts. I know not everybody uses Facebook, and just trying to find a way to communicate and reach as many people as possible. I do feel like God's got something that He's doing in me and some things that He is trying to share with me, and things I'm learning, and things I think that the church, Christians, the world needs to hear. And so I'm just trying to see how this goes. Probably won't be paying too much attention to the video feed. Just trying to get this recorded and get the information out there, start a conversation, and see what happens. So we've talked about a whole bunch of things. Hopefully you got a chance to hear my first guest. Cheryl is awesome, and it was a great podcast, a lot of fun. Hope to have her back again soon. Anybody out there that wants to be on a podcast, anybody that wants they've got something to say, they're looking for a place to say it, they want to have a conversation, tough topics are welcome too. Please let me know. Send me an email, jesusissweeter@gmail.com. Send me a message on Facebook. Just try and reach me somehow. Be happy to have that conversation. I think we need more of that. Today, we've talked about getting started. We've talked about no fear of failure. We've talked about life getting interrupted. And I think an essential piece of the puzzle when we're doing anything and when we're talking about discipleship, following Jesus, is dealing with the ways that we need to think about getting better, the ways we need to grow, the ways we can go about trying to be the best that we can be. And of course, this is Sweet Jesus. Ice cream is sweet. Jesus is sweeter. Jesus is the sweetest thing, the best thing, the most fulfilling thing, the most satisfying thing that we will ever encounter. Nothing else in this world can satisfy us the way Jesus can. Nothing else can equip us and help us to be the best we can be the way Jesus can. That's something that I'm going to talk about today. And here's how it started. So my wife was reading a book on marriage. We're sitting in the car. We're on a trip this summer, and I look over and I'm like, "What are you doing? You're reading a book on marriage?" She says, "Oh, don't worry. I read a book on marriage every year." What? Wait a second. Is there something I need to know? What's going on? And actually, I think it's a really good thing that she wants to work on our marriage, that she wants to be the best she can be, that she wants to make sure that we are the best we can be. But I did think it was kind of funny initially when we were trying to have that conversation. And one of the things that she mentioned in the first part of the book, she was just let me know what it was about and, to allay all my fears. And the author is talking about kind of two ways of dealing with conflict, dealing with problems in a marriage, dealing with all kinds of challenges that come up in marriage. The issues are dealt with in one of two ways. Typically, we've got the upbringing. Maybe you're part of a household like this where you don't talk about those things. You just simply don't talk about them at all. You sweep them under the rug. You act like they're not there. And the other way is maybe you've been a part of a family like this where, everybody talks about everything, but they don't have any kind of filter. They don't have any kind of, a censor on exactly how you have that conversation, right? So it's just like you either blow up or you have these kinds of situations where nothing ever gets dealt with, nothing ever gets talked about, you never get anywhere, and actually the problems tend to get bigger. The more you sweep things under the rug, the bigger the pile under the rug gets, and then suddenly everybody's tripping over it. That's been my experience in ministry is that I found myself showing up in churches, and again, talking about marriage a little bit, talking about churches, how it applies to all this kind of stuff. I come from a family where you tended to talk about things, you tended to express your thoughts, express your feelings. Even if I wasn't always allowed to do it, I watched a lot of people in my family, my immediate family, my extended family kind of express themselves pretty directly. I'm also from New York. People tend to be a lot more direct in New York. And then I find myself in all these situations, in churches especially, where there's like all this stuff that everybody knows about, all these problems that have been there forever, and it's like nobody wants to talk about it. And I think probably one of the biggest challenges facing the church today is that we've got all these issues, we've got all these challenges, and nobody wants to talk about it. Or we start talking about it, and we start yelling and screaming at each other. And I think that's actually why churches tend not to talk about things, because they know what happened last time. They know what happened the last time they tried to talk about things and express themselves and deal with issues. And so what I'm actually beginning to think is that this is actually more of an American problem. I actually spent like an hour and a half on the phone with another pastor out of state, out of the area today, and we were talking about how we have both tried to lean into some of the situations that have been going on in the world today, try and understand them as much as we can, try and be a part of conversations, try and come up with solutions, to be a part of the solution, not to be part of the problem, to be part of the solution. And we are both kind of lamenting the reality that we just feel like we don't have a place, that everyone is just so sensitive that we can't even begin to have serious conversations. And so those of you that have lamented the snowflake culture of our college campuses, guess what? It's not just there. It's everywhere. And I heard a quote. There's another guy doing a podcast, Abraham Hamilton III, I believe was his name. I didn't get to listen to the whole thing, but one of the first things he said in the beginning of this podcast, somebody sent it to me, was, what happens in the White House isn't nearly as important as what happens in your house. So I think that if we as Christians in this country, or people at least that are interested in Christianity, or just kind of be willing to be a part of sort of bridging the gap between two sides, right? Because not everyone's going to be Christian in this country. Not everyone is going to agree, even if they are Christians, right? But there's got to be a way for us to begin to have dialogue. It's going to start with us. I believe it's going to start with us, with Christians, because we have the resources, we have the capacity to do this because of Jesus. And it's such a unique thing. We have to do it. We've got to recognize what we have, and we've got to put it into practice. And so here's what I mean. We talked about this a little bit last time with the fear of failure. If we are so concerned about a particular issue, if we are so concerned about a particular political candidate, or a particular situation, or a particular person, or a particular situation that happens to impact us or someone we care about, if there's something that has been such an important part of our lives for such a long time that's at risk, we have something far greater than anything that could be in play. We have something far, our reputation even is not even important. And I know reputations can be important. There's a reason why the Bible talks about bearing false witness. There's a reason why, if you're Lutheran, you know the Small Catechism, the explanation to what we would call the Eighth Commandment. Not everyone would call call it the 8th commandment. I think some say it would be the 9th commandment. You should not bear false witness, but what does this mean? We need to speak well of our neighbor as well, uphold his reputation, because it's an important thing. But if we're a Christian, and we know what God thinks, and we know that God's got our back when we are faithful, that God is looking out for us even when we're not faithful, what could possibly be such a big deal that we would be devastated by criticism, that we would be devastated by hearing something that is true about us, that is going to help us grow? Certainly, as we go into some of these conversations that are taking place or not really taking place in our society right now, we don't need whatever it is to be. All we need is Jesus. And I think Christians, we're going to have to begin to be willing to listen to some of the criticisms of our culture, because there's a reason why people have been leaving the church in droves. They haven't just been leaving the church in droves because of COVID, because of pick an issue. They've been doing this for decades, for almost 2 generations now. There's been this mass exodus from the church. And I think the response has typically been, wow, they're just a bunch of unholy, awful, worthless people, and we're just the ones who are faithful, and we get it, and we got everything right. And you know what? It's better to be in a group of a few that get it right than hanging out with all these awful people over here. Now, I'm not saying there's not some truth to that. I'm not saying that it's sometimes the fact that we are faithful can make people be uncomfortable in the church or not want to be associated with us. Jesus, I think, is evidence that sometimes when you do the right thing, you don't get rewarded, you get yourself in trouble, right? I mean, here's a guy who did everything right, and they crucified him for it. I'm not saying that's not true. But I also feel like we have been so tone deaf to a lot of the issues that people bring up. I think pastors in particular, I'm a pastor, so I think I can say this. We have been so sensitive that we have been unable to hear criticism well. And so because we've been unable to hear criticism well, there are an awful lot of people that have been left by the wayside. We've done ministry less well. And, you know, being able to hear the truth, being able to hear criticism is an essential part of discipleship. If we can't hear how we are not in line with the gospel, if we can't hear how we are not in line with the teaching of Jesus Christ, even as Christians, right? So even as a Christian, we might get this wrong, right? If we can't hear that, we can't be a disciple. How can we ever get to apply all of Christ's teaching to our lives? How can we make him truly Lord of our lives, King of our lives, if we aren't willing to hear how, whoa, Jesus isn't king there. Jesus isn't king there. You're king there, or something else is king there. You're not letting Jesus be king there. I think we've been way too sensitive. I think it's largely a product of the culture we're in Our culture has gone this way. This is a widespread American phenomenon. But boy, if we have any hope of getting over all of this, we have got to be better about hearing things we don't want to hear. It's just the way it is. And some of it is going to be helpful. Some of it's going to be spot on. It's going to be right, and we're going to have to hear it, and we're just going to have to take it and go, all right, I got to fix this. Some of it is not going to be right. Some of it's going to be out of context. Some of it's going to be sort of just a small little snapshot without taking in the larger picture. Some of it's things we can't do anything about. But if we can hear it, first of all, we're letting people know that we're listening. And that demonstrates love and demonstrates we believe they are valuable. But we're also going to be better able to understand them. And we're going to be better able to share the message, to speak to them, to speak in a way that is heard, not just heard with their ears, but heard with their hearts and their minds and their lives. How does Jesus help us do that? Well, when you've already heard that you are so awful that it took nothing less than the death of the sinless Son of God to save you, that you are on a collision course with hell, what else could you possibly hear? I mean, really, what else could you hear about yourself that would be so devastating that you can't overcome it, right? But of course, the other side of this, and some of you heard me say this, and you're like, maybe you get it, maybe you think you get it, and you're like, why does he keep saying this? Because this is at the heart of everything. And the fact is that even when you hear it, you haven't really heard it. I am still saying this to myself and applying it to a variety of ways in my life to try and be the faithful man of God that I think God is calling me to be. So once you've heard how awful you are and how far you were from God and that it took nothing less than the death of the sinless Son of God to save you, but then you also heard that even though all of this stuff was wrong with you, even though all of this stuff had gotten between you and God, even though the consequences of that were so devastating, it meant an eternity of separation from the one who gave you life, the one who is the only one who can fulfill you and satisfy you and make you thrive the way that we were always intended to thrive. That person still loves you so much that they were willing to do what was necessary. If you know Jesus and you really have come to an understanding of just how much you have not lived a life in line with God and His will, and His ways, and His word, what else could you possibly hear? Like, oh, yeah, figures, right? I'm a sinner. I'm broken. That's why God had to send Jesus to save me. But you know what? I'm so loved. I'm so accepted. I'm so in. Nothing can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus, my Lord. Romans 8, 38 and 39. Hey, come on. Fire away. Let me know. I would love to be better so that I can better reflect Jesus, so that you can come to know Jesus, so that the people that God places around me can come to know Jesus. So, brothers and sisters, what happens in our house is far more significant than what happens in the White House or anyone else's house or God's house, the churches, the communities, Christian communities that we are all a part of, often a part of as Christians. So what are we going to do about it? I want to encourage you to find someone that you trust, that you believe loves you, that you believe has an ability to have your best interests at heart and deliver truth to you that you may need to hear, and that you'd be able to hear it from them, right? They'd be able to communicate in a way that's not going to get you all riled up, that's not going to get you fighting back and defensive. Find someone that can do that and practice hearing criticism. Proverbs 27 has a bunch of good stuff in it. There are a couple of verses that come to mind. Proverbs 27 verse 6 says, "Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses." I think we have worked so hard to try and put people around us that tell us what we want to hear, that like us, that affirm us, and we've created a culture like that in our country and in our churches that we're actually enemies to one another because we haven't delved deep into relationships with people where we have that trust, we have that love, that connection, that we believe they do have our best interests at heart, and we've let them know that they can confront us about things that we need to hear. And so we're missing out on these wounds from friends that can be trusted. A little bit further in that same chapter, Proverbs 27 verse 17 says, this is something a lot of people are probably familiar with, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Y'all, the world is so crazy. Things are changing so fast. And it is more and more challenging to try to do ministry, to try to be Christian, to be faithful in our world. We need to be sharp. We need to be our best. God deserves our best. God has given us his best. He has given us his Son, Jesus. And he's given us our Son, Jesus, to let us know we can hear whatever it is that he wants us to hear. We can do it because we know we are so incredibly loved and accepted no matter what we hear, no matter how many times we fail, no matter how often we hear the same kind of criticism or the same kind of thing, like, oh, there it is again, oh, there it is again. Because we know that our identity isn't based off of being good. Our identity isn't based off of getting everything right. Our identity isn't based off of being perfect or fixing everything in the world around us. And so we can be less defensive, we can be more open to criticism, we can be able to engage people that, man, they're really not going to like us. And that's only becoming more true. And it's not always going to be fair. But it's not always going to be unfair. It's not always going to be wrong. And are we going to be grounded enough in Jesus, in the sweetness of Jesus? Are we going to be grounded enough in that to be able to hear it? So that we can be who God wants us to be. So we can be the best in our service for him. And as we try to reach out to our communities, to help transform our communities, our divided communities, our divided cities, our divided nation, and bring about some transformation, some good stuff that is desperately needed. So I know it's been helpful for my marriage to be able to hear things that maybe I didn't want to hear. I know it's been really helpful for my ministry to be able to hear things I didn't want to hear, to not take things so personally. And I know that the only reason I was ever able to do that was not because I did something, really. I earned it. I exerted my will to achieve it. But because I recognized how I wasn't really believing Jesus. I wasn't really trusting Jesus. I wasn't really convinced that he was everything that I needed. So I encourage you to find a brother or sister in Christ. To, if you're not a Christian, you're listening to this, to find somebody that you know has your best interests at heart, somebody who cares about you, who you trust to give it to you straight, give you the truth, and to do it in a way that will help you be the best you can be, and see what happens. Be open to what God reveals, so you might actually see where you have some idols, you have some things that you trust more than you trust God, that are going to have to get torn down in order for you to be the best you can be, in order for you to hear. And that's part of the process. It may not be something somebody says. It might be how you react to something somebody says that reveals what's really going on in your heart. But if you're willing to engage in that difficult work, if you're willing to put it all on Jesus, to completely trust in Jesus, to hear things you may not want to hear from other people, and to be willing to do it for Jesus, I think you'll be surprised how helpful it is and how much you grow and the impact that it has on the people around you, in your spouse, your kids, the people you work with, the people you play with, where you do life with, have fun with. And that is what our world needs more of right now. So, all right, hey, great to be with you. Thanks for this experiment. We've had some folks tuning in live on Facebook. Thank you. And those of you listening to the recording later from the podcast, God bless you as well. Thank you for being a part of this. Like, comment, subscribe, share. God bless you. We'll see you. Bye-bye.